show, and hope that music got your heart and soul fired up and ready to go. It's a beautiful day here in northern Illinois, overlooking all the way up into Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan, Indiana, and parts around the world. With me is the wonderful world traveler, mountain climber, philanthropist, and just all around good guy, and an ex-Freeport pretzel, as am I. What is his name? Robert Mills. How you doing, Robert?
Terrific, Randy. And it's a gorgeous day out here on the left coast. You can see, we can see Mexico, and I can't quite see Russia, but we can,
Well,
it's beautiful, and it's springtime here. The flowers are coming in. I went out for a little drive this morning, and all these wildflowers are just everywhere now. We get our spring here in February, and it's gorgeous.
these are my favorite days. I tell everybody, and they lose hope when we in early February. I just say wait till the end of February, because that's March sun. It warms things up, and once you get rid of the snow, they predict it'll be 50 degrees. It'll be 60 degrees because they don't take into the earth warming. Today was beautiful,
You
beautiful.
know, I moved here, as you know, to California when I was young, and it took me a while here in Northern California to get used to the seasons here. We had 4 seasons in Freeport where I live with you, and here we only have 2 seasons. We have the wet season where everything turns green, and then we have the dry season where it turns brown. We've talked about this. The famous explorer John Fremont came here, and when he came here in July, it was golden, and so he called the Golden Gate after some strait in Turkey. But if he'd come here now, he would have called it the Emerald Gate. We'd have the Emerald Gate Bridge because it's just totally green right
Huh.
now. It takes getting used to, but by the time you're having your flowers, everything is turning brown here, and it won't rain a drop in Northern California between April and November.
Wow, that's just amazing. Yeah, no, the beauty here, living in, of course, in DeKalb County, the glacial back and forth dumped 18 to 24 inches of potting soil where we live, and made it all flat. So we're called flatlanders. And by that, I mean you literally can go out to the field and pick up a bucket of soil in a cornfield, take it home, and it truly is that. It's like potting soil. I mean, it's why the crops are
Oh,
so rich. But the thing that you grow to really appreciate is the change of seasons. Watching the farmers get these big, massive fields ready. Del Monte, of course, has corporate fields here, tens of thousands of acres. And it's amazing what the equipment today can go in and get done in a matter of a day. But watch the fields be, turned over and tilled up, and then the seeding going in, and then seeing those first little sprigs of, corn,
yeah.
soybeans, coming up. It's just fascinating. And
Yeah,
I'm
here we have this huge Central Valley where like 30% of all the food in the US is grown right there.
yeah.
And they have these gigantic machines that do this huge efficiency that go through and do that. And it's amazing to watch that.
Yeah. I was out. I did during the year of COVID. I actually went to one of the farmers that actually is growing very specific corn for his distillery that's on the property, about 30 miles east of DeKalb. And riding in his equipment. Of course, now it's all computer controlled. He has many various types of corn, because it's not just regular feed corn that he's putting into his distilled products. And of course, in our distillery channel productions, we've learned what it takes to make good bourbon. And of course, bourbon has to be 51% corn, to begin with, and you do other things in that 49%. So he has these fields set up to put in just all these different, varieties of corn. And but the fascinating thing is it's like what do they call those things that do your house automatically? Roombas, maybe. Uh,
Yeah.
the thing goes back and forth. Well, that's how these tractors are set up. You get in, he turns it on, it knows exactly where it was when he put the seeds in, and it makes all these turns, and it's exactly spot on, and we're just having a nice conversation riding along in this beautiful air-conditioned cab, and it's all done. It's very, very obviously automated, but a very fascinating ride listening to them.
You mentioned about the marks of the residue of the glaciers. Out here in the Sierra, up in the mountains just east of here, there's all these marks. We call it glacier polish. That these glaciers came down and they crushed and polished the granite. So down in these valleys, you can see this polish and see the streaks in it. And it's very quite dramatic. And they the glaciers pushed up these huge things called lateral moraines where they drop the rocks they scooped up. And at the end, they have a terminal moraine where they have an enormous pile of rocks. And the glaciers have come back up. And,
Yeah,
scientists, people knew that climate came and went. I mean, these glaciers came and went in Europe, and they see this in Europe and everywhere. People knew that the climate changed. Glaciers came and went for centuries. They just didn't know why. And it was John Tyndall, Irish physicist in 1859, that he discovered earlier the greenhouse effect of carbon dioxide. He published a paper in 1859 in which he says volcanoes put carbon dioxide in the air, warms up the earth, the glaciers retreat, plants and trees take out the carbon, sequestered under the ground coal, oil, and gas. The atmosphere cools, the glaciers come back. That's climate change.
hmm.
You can also see that, it took until 1900 before we put 2 billion tons of carbon in the air, humans. Now it's 40 billion tons a year of carbon. And there's this place on Mauna Lea, you know about. There's a lab up there. They measure the carbon in the Earth's atmosphere every year, and it's a big standard because it's way out in the middle of the ocean, and it's a great place. It's gone up 25% since 1957.
Hmm.
And half of that since the Industrial Revolution. Now there's more carbon dioxide in the air than there has been in millions and millions of years, and the Earth is rapidly warming.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember, but I'm not sure exactly where you were living at the time, but in junior high in Freeport, I remember the first report of a hole in the ozone, and that sounded just so bizarre. What do you mean a hole in the ozone? And they had gone down to the Antarctic and they said, "Oh yeah, there's a hole in the ozone." And they go, "Well, like, well, what's that from?" And they said, "Well, it's like hairspray. Too much hairspray, is in the air and it somehow put this hole in the ozone." And you just sort of like shrug it off because first of all, how did they even measure it? And I'm a kid in junior high, and that whole hole in the ozone type scenario. What does it mean to us? Actually, there's been a report that it's actually shrinking at this point in time. It's sort of
Well,
healing itself.
they changed the chemicals that were in all the sprays, and that's
Right.
what made it. The one thing people need to understand about the Earth and the atmosphere is how thin it is. We have this tiny, thin atmosphere. It's only 3.5 miles thick at sea level pressure. You took a tube 3.5 miles and tipped it up, it would be the same number of molecules. Half the atmosphere is under 18,000. That's why there's glaciers in the mountains. When you go up in a jet airplane, the sky changes color. It changes color because when they cruise at 35,000 feet, you're over 75% of the Earth's atmosphere, and they
Right.
can go fast with little friction. And so it's easy to pollute this tiny, thin little film of atmosphere that we have. And we did it with aerosol sprays, and it
Yeah.
wiped out the ozone. And they changed it. They stopped putting them in those things, and the Earth recovered and the ozone hole started to go back down. We could do the same thing with carbon, if we switch to
Right.
solar power. Um,
Yeah. And the thing is, like people, and we've mentioned this before, but when it comes to, um, well, let's just talk about Maui for a minute. They had torrential rains over in Maui in the last couple of weeks, and I just saw some photos of the Kihei area, which is a town on the coast on the south side of Maui. Now, very, very popular. I mean, it's if there is a place where the prices might be a little bit more moderate than anywhere else, it'll be in the Kihei area. A lot of great condos there. Um, but the rains were so heavy for the first time, it washed down feet of mud where the people that live there, cars are just encrusted in a foot of mud from top to bottom. I mean, they're embedded in lava mud. I mean, there's no mud on Maui. It's lava basic,
Lava dust.
lava dust, exactly. And James A. Michener, by the way, wrote a great book called Hawaii, which starts out and talks about, these rocks in the middle of the ocean. How possibly could they have ever gone green? And it is very fascinating. His opening paragraph talks about this bird, lonely bird, flying around, out in the ocean, and all of a sudden, basically, I'm very much paraphrasing James A. Michener, but he says this bird lands and on this island and defecates, leaving the first organic material. And over hundreds of thousands of years, more birds came and more defecation came, and basically the island became green due to aviary defecation over, hundreds of thousands of years. So enjoy Maui. It's very expensive, and understand, don't eat the dirt, I guess is what you want to do. But um, the rains that hit Kihei and hit Maui were just torrential this last month. Pictures that I could never imagine seeing. And I've been there when it's rained hard. I mean, for weeks, and
We're in
unfortunately,
for a lot more of that because the warmer the air is, the more moisture it can hold. And
yeah,
as the earth warms, these rains, torrential rains and flooding is going to go up, as are hurricanes and tornadoes and
yeah,
like that. And it's going to get a great deal worse every year. And here in Northern California, we had rains like we've never had before. And I go camping up to this little place up on the Russian River, and the site where it is, they ran a video when I went to book, my kids for a camping trip, and it shows whole houses. In the community area, falling into the Russian River and floating down the
yeah,
river, from this, enormous, floods that are coming, but more coming, more coming.
yeah. Well, they actually had that up at the Wisconsin Dells about 10 years ago, Lake Delton. And they had, again, torrential rains that came through this little lake. And of course, Wisconsin Dells in Wisconsin, when we talk about travel, a couple of things we sort of already touched on is that as the glacial era receded north in the Midwest, of course, gouging out your Great Lakes and different things like that. But what was dumped out in Illinois was the fertile soil, and then you get to Wisconsin, becomes a little more sandy, a little more rocky, and then in the Wisconsin Dells area, just south of there, they have Devil's Lake, fascinating hike around the lake because it's called the driftless area, but that's where these big boulders were dropped, as the glacial push went retreated. And you could sit and say, how powerful did anything have to be to, I mean, these multi-hundred-ton
Oh,
rocks piled on top of each other, just incredible. And
um,
you could take your kids there, relatively inexpensively. 2 million, 2.5 million people go to Devil's Lake, and just north of there by about 15, 20 minutes is the Wisconsin Dells. And
yeah.
about 12 million people go there. And two very different cultures. Those that go to the lake stay there and they camp and they take their hot dogs and they stay by the lake. And the rest of them go to the Dells. And it's very interesting, very commercial, a lot of great nature. I'm sorry, go ahead. I know I was cutting you off.
Um, I forgot to mention when I was talking about the climate is that, excuse me, I got this stuff in my car that makes me, I'm gonna have to get the filters changed or something. But the mountain behind me is Mount Tyndall, named
Right.
after this Irish physicist discovered, and it's one of California's 14,000 foot peaks. And I climbed it once, but I took this picture coming down from Mount Williamson, which is the second highest in California, which is off to your left here, this way. I just came down and had climbed it, and I got up at 2 in the morning and went up and reached the summit at 3:30, and I got back down here, which was a long ways from my tent, which was down miles and miles below here. But I got the last rays of the sunset here,
Beautiful.
and
Just
I didn't
beautiful.
get to my tent till 11:30 at night,
So so getting into your mountain climbing, and we'll get to, by the way, as we say to our dedicated listeners, we are going to continue on, pick Robert's brains about some of the favorite places that he's gone to. We're going to talk about actually three places. I'm going to throw in a third while sitting here and talking to you. I'm going to throw in a little bit about Italy. I found it fascinating. I wanted to share with you. But we're going to talk about Denmark and Morocco, two very different cultures that Robert has on his list. But in your hiking and camping and out, I asked you some off the chart questions like, well, did you ever dine with Sasquatch or, the abominable snowman, you learn his language, any UFOs, participate. But if you've been climbing those hills, have you ever had any, I mean, do you what have any problems running in or dealing with bears or things that might consider you good dinner?
Of course. I have been attacked by bears. I'm not me personally, but years ago, with my going with a girlfriend to climb White Mountains beyond the Sierras, and I parked in a campground, and I made the mistake of leaving salami in the back seat of my car, and which is an idiot,
Yeah.
tourist imbecile thing to do. It's all my fault. And, a couple of great big gigantic bears came along, reached their paws up and pulled the back window out. And then they, in the front window, and they hopped into the back seat, two gigantic bears. And so I heard this. It sounded like somebody tearing a piece of plywood. So I look out of my tent at 4 in the morning in the moonlight, and I shine the light over, and I see these two eyes. These two bears are sitting up in the back seat eating the salami. And so I get out and scream at them and carry on. And they,
Yeah.
they get up and they look this surly at me and they wander off. And so that was, and another time I was in Yosemite with another girlfriend, and I followed the rules. In those days, 15 feet up in a tree, 15 feet out, and 15 feet off the ground, you have a sack with your food in it. And that way the bear on a rope, and the bears can't get it, right?
Yeah.
So all night long, these bears came and I could hear them, and it was a full moon. And this mother bear comes and sends her cubs up the tree. And the cubs, one of them goes out the limb and gets on the rope and slides down the rope like an alpine climber and sits on top of the pack and chews through the rope. The pack falls down. The mother tears it to shreds and eats all the food in it. And my girlfriend and I get up in the morning and we got no food.
Well, it's spectacular. I was on a up north in Wisconsin, Lake Namakaga one time, just in a staying in a condo we rented for the family. And I wake up early in the morning, clearly heard, no question about it, help, help. And I'm like, somebody's drowning in the lake. The lake's flat. So being around a lake all my life, somebody's yelling help like that in the morning, they obviously could be an older person, whatever. Help, help, and so I go running outside, and from the condo to the lake, it's a pretty good jaunt, and I keep hearing this help toward the lake. All of a sudden, I get to the lake, and the water is still flat. I can't find anybody. And all of a sudden, I hear help, help. And I look up in the tree above me. It's a bear cub, baby bear cub, stuck up in this tree. And I'm like going, so the cub's up there, door to my condo's over there. Where's mom? It's my first thought. Because I'm like, I am screwed, because I'm standing, looking straight up at this bear cub yelling for help, and I'm going to be the next one yelling for help. So I never saw Mama until I got up to the condo, but I know she had to be there.
I'm just gonna tell a quick story about help. Me and two guys a long time ago climbed Banner Peak. It's near Mammoth Lakes in California. It's a big mountain. We coming back down, and it was getting dark. Like it was dark, and we're walking along this, and there's kind of a draw, and we're going along this draw on the snow with our crampons and ice axes, and I hear this. And I turned to my two climb partners and said, "Did you hear that? Robert, come on, you smoking." And they just dismissed it. And so on we went. And then just as we were about to crest this thing and go down the next straw, putting us out of earshot of anything that came out of that thing, there's this voice. And I turned to my friends and they heard it. Without saying a word, we all three ran toward where the sound was. And we went down this steep thing. And at the bottom of it, there's this poor young girl, alone, torn, really injured severely, who had slipped and fallen. Just the very most common form of injury in the whole Sierra, probably in the whole country. People go
Wow.
out on ice and don't have ice axe or crampons, and they slip on top of the surface of that packed snow and slide down and crash into the rocks. That's what she did. So one of us stayed with her. We got our first aid kits and started went to work on her. Another one, me, went back to our camp to bring a sleeping bag and stove and give her warm food and things like that. And the other guy ran 10 miles, 12 miles in the dark to Reds Meadows to a payphone with the quarters and call 911.
Wow.
And they said, stay there. And at dawn, a helicopter landed in the parking lot, picked him up, and took him. And she was rescued at dawn. And we
Hmm.
kept her alive all night, wrapped up in a sleeping bag and giving her hot food. She had broken bones everywhere.
Oh,
Uh,
gee.
and she was she was airlifted to a hospital. She recovered 100%. She was fine. But um, I'll always remember that moment. And a life hung in the balance over
Yeah.
a matter of seconds. If we had just, if she had not said anything, I didn't have enough, I wasn't sure enough. You hear these sounds of,
Sure.
we would have crested this little knoll and gone down the next, and that would have been it. And she would not have made it through the night. The doctors assured us of that. So, she called up to thank these three strangers that saved her life on that dark, windy, cold night, and it was quite an experience.
That is something else. That's quite a story. The one thing I wanted to get before we get into yours, have you heard about these homes in Italy that you can buy for $1?
Yes.
Yeah, I did a little more research into what that means, and they're quite old. I mean, they are definitely a fixer-upper. There's no question about that.
They're fixer-uppers, and they're in communities where there's no jobs, and you're
Yeah,
far from healthcare and far from a lot of other things.
yeah,
And so there's not a big line, to buy these homes. And I mean, all over the world, you can buy homes, that fairly
yeah,
inexpensively. And, for it to be attractive to Americans, especially, you got to live there to make sense.
yeah,
And for most Americans getting retired, healthcare is an issue, and uh, a lot of these places are out in kind of ruralish areas, and if you're young and it can be fun and everything. My brother, speaking of which, he went down to Morocco. He lives in Switzerland, and he's married to an Italian. Who's a doctor. She's a medical doctor with two PhDs, and they went down to Morocco and in the old capital of Fez, which is inland, and they changed it like way hundreds of years ago. They moved it to Rabat on the coast. And so all these great old mansions that were there, that the nobility and other people, these huge Andaluvian castles they were abandoned. And so they're still there. And a couple of years ago, people would go there, and so my brother went there with his wife, and they see this beautiful place. I mean, and there's donkeys in the kitchen. I mean, it's just a ruin,
yeah.
and it's for sale for like 8 grand or something,
Wow.
And so they buy it, like a lot of it, French and Italians were buying in that area, and they spent the next 8 or 10 years. You can hire local artisans for $2 an hour who were
Wow.
extremely talented, and they turned it into this Andaluvian palace, with fountains and marble and mosaics and fruit trees on the inside of this courtyard, and it is a showcase today for a pittance, but
Does he
for
still own it?
Oh yeah, he still owns it, and
Yeah.
and if you want to stay there, I can make a deal with you.
Is
I
that
mean,
right?
he lets his friends come there and stay, and he has a live-in guy to take care of it and his family. And this guy has a car and will take you anywhere, So that's one way he augments it is that he rents it out to people and does an Airbnb type thing, and but Fez is this incredibly colorful place. I mean, it has these streets that are like this wide, and a donkey can barely get through it. And people take these donkeys through loaded with Coca-Cola into little shops, and people are sitting out in their shops, like barkers trying to get you to come in and to sell you what they have to sell you in these little tiny shops. and people are playing in the streets, and it is an amazingly colorful, spectacular, and it looks 500 years old
Hmm.
everywhere, all around there. And Morocco is an amazing country. It's the most European friendly and US friendly. It was the only Arab country that supported us in the Iraq War, the only one. And they like Americans. And it's a fairly liberal place where Al Qaeda has never really got much of a foothold. And they're relatively liberal. And it is an extremely colorful country. It is spectacularly gorgeous. And with all these customs and these colors and these dresses and everything, and people still with camels and all. And my brother, I went down there with him, and he took me down the Atlas Mountains, and we went out to these wild places with sand dunes, and it was we're on the Algerian border, and there's these huge mountains, the Atlas Mountains there, and you can ski them. Um, and so it is I highly recommend, that, and the culture is a biculture. There were Berbers, Berber. That's where the Barbary coast came from. And that's what Americans called the North African coast in the early 1800s, because the pirates there, who were paid, ransom or whatever you call it, by the European powers. And when we were before the revolution, we sailed under the British flag and our trading ships that went there. And afterwards, we used the French flag for a while. And then they finally said, use your own flag. So we started using our own flag. And guess what? The pirates captured our ships and dragged them into these ports like Tripoli and ransomed. They captured the USS Philadelphia and ransomed it for $1 million, which was 10% of the federal budget in those days. And so that led John Adams to say, because when the founders set up the United States, we don't need a military. We don't need a Navy. We're not going to have a Navy. We don't need one. Well, this was quite a lesson for them. So we ended up getting a Navy. And the first battle we had was in Tripoli. And it was one of the great battles that is unsung. This Decatur, Stephen Decatur, went to Greece and hired 30,000 mercenaries and snuck them through Egypt around behind Tripoli. And then he sunk his fleet in, dressed up like they were pirates themselves. And then at the right moment, they all started firing on the fortress where they surrendered, and they promised to never do it again. And the Marines captured it, and that's where that the Marine song about from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli.
Wow.
That's Tripoli. That's where it came from.
Thank you for that.
And so in
Yeah.
San Francisco, a generation later, we had this red light district. We called it the Barbary Coast because they originally called it the Barbary Coast because of the white slavery and all the depredations that went on there. And so you can see why in San Francisco they would take that name. So I thought that was
Yeah.
Morocco is the Berbers were originally there. The original ethnic group were Berbers, and that's where the Barbary Coast comes in. And then the Arabs came like in the 7th century, and they came from the Saudi Arabia area, and they conquered the Berbers, and they took it over. And then you had the two ethnic groups there, and there's the Berber language and Arabic, and so you have these two cultural things in Morocco. And it's always traded with Europe and has been sort of more sophisticated and cosmopolitan than some of these other places, and has a long, long history of trading with the West. And so it's a safe place, and it's an incredible vacation to go to Morocco. I strongly recommend it. It's safe, it's fun, and it's inexpensive, and incredibly colorful. And they like Americans. There's not many places left that. And so we'll talk about Denmark a little bit.
Yeah, I want to go back just for a moment down to Morocco. So in their dietary practices, now do they eat meat or is that Arab?
Yes, yes, they eat lamb. They
Yeah.
don't eat pork, of course, because the Islamic don't eat pork, but they eat lamb, and they have a lot of curries and stuff, and they have a wonderful Moroccan cuisine,
Now
and
is
they
beef on
have
that menu?
five-star hotels with fabulous Moroccan cuisine.
Yeah. Is beef on the menu?
I don't remember. Probably, I don't think there's any prohibition, and the Europeans would probably like it. Uh,
I know when I went to Dubai, beef was not on their menu. It was made, it was eating a lot of vegetables. They might have had lamb. I'm not really sure. I'm not a big lamb eater, so it was a very veggie week for me.
Beef requires grass.
Yeah,
Beef cows, beef steers, and they eat grass, and there is no grass in Dubai. And so you can understand why. I mean, they either have to import it; it's expensive. It'd be not be a native thing.
yeah,
Morocco's got mountains, and so they probably got places where the grass would grow and they could actually raise it. I don't remember if they have it. My guess is they do, and they do serve beef.
yeah. It's just curious. I don't eat a lot of beef anymore myself. It's just sometimes people say, "Well, we went over there and we couldn't have it." Anyway, going further, now we are going to make a big leap, going to Denmark, and one of the places I've always wanted to go, know very little about it, but
Is Denmark? You mean is Denmark?
yeah, Denmark. Yeah,
Well, my brother was a technician while he was in school at UC Medical Center in San Francisco, and the head nurse was a Danish person. She was, there on a green card of some sort, and she was quite talented. And they fell in love, and she said, "Come with me. Let's get married, and we'll go back to Denmark." And he always wanted to live in a foreign country. So he said, okay. So he went back to Denmark with her. They got married and they had a daughter. And I went to Denmark and visited them many, many times. And he took me all over Denmark and introduced me to all these people in Denmark. And I kind of fell in love with Denmark myself. It is an amazing country. It is a country that at the time I went there and until recently, was almost monoethical. I mean, it was only this certain white, and so throughout the world, this is my experience traveling around that when countries have multi-ethnic back, they don't get along quite as well. I mean, some of them do, but it's generally speaking, the more ethnic stuff, the less they get along or trust each other. And so with Denmark, you had right off the bat everybody the same last name. I'm exaggerating, but so they all got along great. In fact, they had this Danish word, and I forgot what it is, but it basically like it means that we're all in the same family, the same tribe that the Danes have for each other. Okay, and that is why the socialists kind of take care of each other. Big social thing that they have works there because it would be shameful for them, they would feel, to steal from it, to exaggerate it. In contrast, here in California, when the COVID thing came and they sent all the checks out to the businesses, we have these morons in Sacramento who use the federal numbers instead of the state employment numbers. They end up being swindled out of $20 billion by scammers who claimed, that they had employees and they didn't really. And some people say it was the biggest single ripoff in the history of the world in terms of dollars. But in Denmark, they have this huge social, and people don't take advantage of it, which makes it easy for them to do that. And Americans have this whole mythology about Denmark. It's always been the bête noire of people talking about they have this high taxes and it's a
right.
socialist state and everything. But having gone there, I decided to do a little experiment because I didn't think this, and my brother was pointing all this stuff out. So I hired this. I didn't really hire him. My brother had a friend who was a very prominent Danish accountant. He had an accounting firm there. And I said, look, and I have my own high-powered accountant here in Dallas. He represents big, I said, look, I want to do an experiment. Okay, people talk about these two countries and the tax and everything else, but I said they don't really take into account that when Denmark you pay this tax, you get right back in free this and free that. I want to do an analysis, okay, of an imaginary couple with 3 kids or 2.5 kids, and they make this amount of money, okay, and they pay these. What is the net? Okay, yeah, there's a higher tax bracket in Denmark, but in Denmark, you get free Social Security, you get free unemployment insurance, you get free health care, you get free, like, retirement stuff and medical things, and you get free, not only get free college, not only do you get free college, my niece is paid $1,000 a month to go to college and to get a degree, get a master's degree. So how would you like it if your kids got $1,000 a month to go to college? It was free. and their health care is better than ours, less waiting, better outcomes. And so if you sit down and you take an American couple, okay, yeah, they pay a nominally lower bracket in taxes, okay, but then they have to put aside money for the 2 to 3 or 400,000 they're going to have to pay for their college education for each kid and start putting that amortized into the bank. They have to pay for health insurance and unemployment insurance and Social Security. And when you get all done with all that, the people in Denmark come out ahead. They
Yeah.
have more spendable net money to them under this system than we do. But because the nominal tax brackets are higher, people they don't take this into account that we use after tax dollars to pay for health care. And so the Danish, the Danish people live an extraordinarily high standard of living, and I think it's pretty comparable to our own. And many people think, me included, that they are going to go past the United States. What they did when I went there 40 years ago, Denmark was largely a country of pig farmers and and herring fishermen, and and then they decided they looked at California, and they looked at and they said, we can do this. And so they set up all these tax incentives for startups. They even built places for here. This is going to be a high-rise office for startups for free rent. We're going to help you. Okay. And what they did is they drew all this talent. Denmark has always had a lot of talent that way. And so they draw all these people and they start all these startups. And so when I went back, a couple of years ago, the most recent time, Copenhagen is this forest of glass skyscrapers, and their standard of living is surging up as they have all these startups. My hearing aids are Danish. All these high tech stuff is Danish. The Danish startups are just eating up the world, given that there's only 5.5 million people in Denmark. And so Denmark is a wonderful place for that. It's going to pass the United States soon and have a higher standard of living. And they have struggled a bit, as all the European countries have, with immigrants. The immigrants that came from the Eastern European countries and from a lot of the Muslim world. And the Eastern Europeans have integrated a little bit, but the Muslim have not really integrated well. And in France, they haven't integrated at all. And so, and in Germany. And so what we have in Europe is the same here, is that the immigration issue is driving elections. You saw the German right win
Right.
yesterday, largely on the immigration issue, and a lot of people think that the Democrats lost largely or very substantially due to the inability to address the immigration issue. And so, that's a big issue. Denmark has a smaller portion of it, and they've clamped down on it. But it is a beautiful country, lush and friendly and safe as can be. They don't have any gun violence at the scale we do. And people like you if you're an American, they'll talk to you. So I strongly recommend Denmark if you want to have it, and it has a beautiful history stuff. And you can go and see the Queen's Castle, and you can see all these incredible castles there and museums, and they have this history going back, and the Danes go back. They had a king like thousands of years. I mean, they've been a kingdom since I think 800. They were founded as a
Now,
kingdom.
just so I get it clear, who owns Greenland?
Well, Denmark owns Greenland as a territory, the same way we used to own Alaska.
Right.
Um, and interestingly, the Greenlanders want to be independent. They don't want to be a Danish possession. They want independence. Um, and But a certain person wants to acquire Denmark. Acquire Greenland because of its minerals. And um, I find that just beyond comprehension that we're going to go back to the 19th century. Uh,
Well,
con-
I want to delve. I want to go off the deep end just here a little bit. This
Right.
is our travel show,
Yeah.
and this is our happy hour
Happy
lifestyle
hour.
show.
Okay. So Denmark owns Greenland, and they have a fairly happy pretty much. I mean, if you gave the Greenlands an offer, they would be independent, but it's a tiny population and it's a gigantic place. And it's all ice in the middle. And you know, trekkers go up there and they trek from one side to the other over this ice cap, you know, pulling sleds, you know, and so it's and the little villages have all these colorful paint jobs on them, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And people that had this plane I had, a Malibu Mirage, they would go to Europe and they would go fly, land in Greenland, and then hop over to Reykjavik and then over to Edinburgh. And that was one of the stops, and they would all take pictures in Greenland. And but other than, I mean, people go to Iceland from here, but it's hard to find somebody who would go to Greenland. You know, you fly over when you go to Europe. You know, you can look down and
There's
see.
actually tours now going to Polar Travel Company, one of our good friends that are out of South America. They're taking some guests there in their ships, and then Tara that owns Green Adventures, which is a women's tour group that she puts together. They've gone to Greenland, and strangely, apparently it's small in terms of the touristy. You know, we're now talking about Greenland, but both of my friends met up in the same town at the same time, and unfortunately for them, they were talking about me because they're like, "Weren't you on Randy's show?" And you know, yeah, and all this. But now they are the cruise ship Polar Travel Company actually takes beautiful cruises and people down to Antarctica and the Arctic, and now they included Greenland. And you have to watch your YouTubes. You can get pretty good idea from both. I was watching both their YouTubes of where they went, and I was on like, well, that looks like the same building. You know, that looks like the same community. And but Tara and our good friends at Polar Travel, they now, I guess, they're having great times. Have you ever been to Iceland?
No, I've never gone to Iceland.
Well, that we have an invite to from. Well, I just attended the PGA, the Professional Golfer Association trade show back in January, and down there they have it's a huge show in Orange County. I've gone to it 40 years, and so they have uh, countries that come and try to encourage people to come play golf in their communities. Well, I never thought about going to Iceland to play golf. I'm not sure that that's the case, but they do have Ireland and Scotland and Spain. Um, and from Ireland, Ireland in particular, we have invites to go there, take our immediate family there, and also through Spain, which I'm very much looking at because the people we're dealing with from the Spanish Office of Tourism were just lovely. Had breakfast with them for a couple mornings at the PGA show, and it was just great. But I want to just go off the rails a little bit in the world of golf, which our happy hour lifestyle show has always been broken up into a couple different offshoots, one of which is Coffee and Tidbits, which is coming back. I'm going to do a Saturday morning. I'm going to just get a cup of coffee. I'm going to sit at my computer, and together I'm going to go through what I find interesting in the morning, talking live as we go through Facebook, just to sit and see because I don't, quite honestly, I don't enjoy Facebook anymore because it's so full of AI and all kinds of disinformation and people fighting and squabbling and combating, and friends now are turning on friends, and I'm gonna unfriend you, this and that. But there are still some interesting, funny stories that come up that are on Facebook and different social media feeds. I found uh, some very interesting uh, information this Saturday. I'm going to go talk about Copenhagen. But in the world of golf, we have a show that's called Where We Play Golf Eco Style, and there are 16,000 golf courses in the United States. Our team has played golf on over 4,000 of those courses over our careers that are very long, which is sometimes you might want the money back and retire when you think about it, because what you're really doing is chasing a set of 18 holes. There's nothing there that are 4.25 inch wide, and you spend a lot of money to tee off a little white sphere to a spot in the hole that you're playing a quarter mile away, and you have some kind of expectation that you're going to get it there in 4 shots. There's nothing logical about the world of golf. But we've been doing this show for many, many years. And this past weekend, an anomaly in golf that'll never happen again, ever, never, ever. And I'm watching, they didn't have all the All-Stars playing. They're playing down for Mexico has their Mexico Open. It's like our US Open, just happened to be in Mexico. It's been a long ongoing PGA tournament. And down there, it's a bunch of people trying to get more status on the PGA Tour. And at the end of the 72, there was a playoff. And two just really nice guys that I never heard of, ever, never. They came from what's called the Corn Ferry Tour, ended up in a playoff. And they were in a 2-hole playoff. And Brian Campbell ended up winning the tournament. And how golf affects people worldwide now. Here's the difference from these two. What happened? You go in this playoff and one guy wins and the other guy doesn't. So the gentleman that doesn't win, of course, he ends up pocketing about $1 million for second place. And it's not a bad day. It might be a little more, a little less. First place, I haven't checked, but could be 1.8 million. And these are the B League, golf shows, but they're trying to expand the world of golf. A lot of our great champions this year have been from the European Ryder Cup team. So these two young men have been, there's a Corn Ferry Tour that both of them played on for years. And Brian played on it. He had his card back in 07 and 08. And then from 07, 08, he played for many, many years in the Corn Ferry Tour, trying to get back to the PGA Tour. Now, this year, he has not made a cut. He has not cashed a paycheck. He has not played well, except for this tournament. He ends up being tied for first at the end of the tournament. Aldrich, and his name is Pot Guider, a 20-year-old young kid from Africa, South Africa, rising all-star. People knew about him because he's played there. He's got a good game. He's going to be around. They end up in this playoff. Now, the fascinating thing about the world of golf is that people can get their ball around the course many different ways. Brian Campbell, when he drives the ball, he hits it on an average 267 yards.
Good Lord.
That's not very far. That's actually, Robert, the shortest on the PGA Tour out of the top 300 measured. The shortest. That's the shortest. Now, when I played competitively, and in fact, still today at our young age, I can still hit the ball about that, which is not too bad.
That's impressive.
But Aldrich Potgeider hits the ball 328 yards. 328 yards. The difference in the ball speed when it takes off from the tee is like the difference of 163 miles an hour initial flight speed for Brian's to 193 miles an hour to Aldrich. 30 miles an hour difference. So when you are now 267 yards out and 328 yards out, a total change of about 70 yards, 60 to 70 yards, that is unheard of. And the anomaly that hit, it is the first time that there's ever been a playoff where the person that hits the ball the shortest was in a playoff with the person that hits the ball the longest. And the person that hits the ball the shortest beat the guy that hits the ball the longest. And to do that, on the last hole that they played, playoff hole, Brian tees his ball. Nerves are all over the place. His girlfriend's waiting for him at the 18th tee. They're all wringing their hands. Aldrich Potgeider's dad is standing to the left of the green, wringing his hand, standing with Brian's girlfriend. And Brian hits his tee ball dead out of bounds. So I'm sure Aldrich is like, man, I got this now. Oh, wait, what? What happened? Oh, it hit a tree and then it bounced back in the fairway? I'm screwed. You just go, really? Oh, man, I could have just, because it was a two-stroke penalty, essentially, he could have just walked it in and Aldrich would have been the winner. Nope, that's not what happened. Ball was out of bounds, hit a tree, bounce back inbounds, and Brian Campbell played it. Next shot short of the hole. It's a par five. Hits it up a foot and a half, 3 feet. Sinks the putt. Beautiful, all time glorious. If you haven't looked it up, hopefully I'm going to post it here. A picture where his girlfriend, runs out, and the difference in money for change of life is that I'm sure Aldrich is going to have some nice contracts coming to him, but Brian will now be all over the world. He gets invited to the US Open, PGA, Tournament Players Champion. He gets to play in all the elevated events that have guaranteed purses in them. That if you go in and you just play terrible and come in last, you're going to win a couple $100,000 for 8 of the tournaments for the next 2 years. He's guaranteed a card. By finishing last in all these big tournaments coming up, he'll make $4 or $5 million.
Wow.
And Aldrich, the guy that hit, and they call it a Walmart tee shot,
Yeah.
does that you between where Brian's ball was and his ball ended up, you could build a Walmart. It's like it's just that much difference, and that should never be the. I mean, the guy that hits the ball the furthest usually wins. But it was just fascinating. And when it comes to world shrinking in the world of golf, now Brian and his lovely girlfriend, who's shedding these crocodile tears, and loving her and talking about the stress of 8 years of playing in, I think, 162 tournaments down in that lower league, and then coming up here and not making a cut and making no money and still having faith. He goes from never making a cut to winning. And
Wow.
that's just called catching lightning in the bottle. I mean, it's an
That's
amazing thing. So now he is known worldwide, and he'll get invites from all over the world to come and play golf. And so it's fun the why we have all of our mishmash of why we talk about all the good things in life is that I've coached a lot of young kids, and I found today I'm going through and unpacking boxes, and there were materials back in my early days of golf, which I had hoped hadn't been thrown away, but I had laminated very important letters of my foundational years in the world of golf. When people would say, "Well, how did you get to the point of meeting these people?" They'd say, "No, Randy, you're just full of BS. You didn't do that." And I go, "Well,
yeah.
yeah, I did. I've got the emails I can show you if I could just find them." Well, today, in the last box that I was suggested to, it looked so terrible. Just throw the box away. I opened it up and I found all my history that goes back
Wow.
40 years, all laminated, all of these really important emails for people that were just beginning their careers that went on to become Ryder Cup captains, amazing careers, and things that still go on today that have my fingerprints on it. And I'm very proud of that.
That's to tell people to keep those things and laminate them just as you did to preserve stuff in your life so you'll have it later because you're going to want it later. And
Yeah. Well, the
but
thing of it is that I spent time with my number two son today, and he was helping me move. And he said, "Dad, don't lift anything anymore." He said, "That, I got 4 sons. You don't have to prove you can move stuff." And I
well,
said to him
I have
today,
two I have two golf courses for you to put on your bucket list, Randy.
"Yeah,
And I've been on them. Didn't play on them, but I've been on them. One of them is in a town called Iquique. It's about halfway down Chile. On
so
the ground,
I'm gonna stop you just there. We got the 3 minute warning, so we got to keep these under an hour. Just so you know, that hour went very quickly."
it went more quickly. So Iquique
Yeah.
is this little town around the water, and they have this magnificent golf course. It's very popular in South America. There's not a sprig of grass on it. It is
Oh,
all sand. It's in this desert, and they have fine sand on the greens, and they have and it's all sand. And then there's
yeah.
another course that is down in Ushuaia, which is that island off the coast south of Magellan Strait, southernmost city in the world, southernmost airport in the world. And there's a golf course there, and it's filled with penguins. When
Wow.
and there's penguins running all over the golf course, and I saw penguins. I saw kangaroos on a course in Australia. So anyway, add those two to your bucket list.
I will, and I appreciate for the day today. We're going to get out of here. Next week, I'm going to divulge 3 of the top most well-known older players that said things to me that I took to heart. And it will be a very interesting tag. But next week we're going to keep enhancing your around the world knowledge because we still have on your list. We haven't talked about Brazil, and we really haven't talked. I want to talk about Ireland because
What to
I
talk
think
about?
Ireland would be a lot of fun, and we have an invite to go there. So, Robert Mills, I want to thank you for another great hour. It goes too quick, but there's reason we keep it at the hour. And you stay safe and healthy. And this is old Uncle Randy for the Live Eco Style team and the Distillery Channel Media, Global Eco Traveling, and all those people out there that take time to leave a better footprint, just like my grandfather said to do, because you want to go out of here always cherishing the world within which we live. So anyway, Robert, you have a great week. Thank you so much for sharing today. Fascinating. Enjoy it. And we'll look forward to talking to you all very, very
Thank you.
soon.
Thank you.
All righty. Good night.
Okay.